Good morning. Welcome in. This is the morning meeting for April 10th. It's a Thursday. It's 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 6 o'clock in Kamala Harris's house, and later in Russia. Thank you for joining. We're happy to have you here. Sean, Dan, and I will take you through the day, kick it around ourselves, and then if you're here on the two-way platform, we welcome your questions. If you'd like to be in on the conversation, please raise your hand. If you're watching on X or YouTube, don't raise your hand and don't put smack in the chat. All conversations here should be conducted under the auspices of the good people of peace, love, and understanding, one of the few law firms in America that has not been targeted by an executive order. Thank you for being here. Sean, where were you when you found out that the president had changed course?
In my kitchen.
In your kitchen. That's a good answer. And do you remember your initial thought bubble?
How much am I about to make?
Dan, how about you?
Actually, it should be more. How much do I make back? Because
I was just going to say that's right. Yeah. I was actually live on Newsmax and had literally just gone on when it flashed across the bottom of the screen, and both myself and the host looked down and looked up, and he said, "Dan, what's your thoughts?"
Who were you on with?
What's his name? John. It was the 1:30 news panel.
John Bachman, my friend John Bachman.
Yes, John Bachman. Thank you.
Yeah. So
I love, and
yes, I love John Bachman. I am both a reporter and a business executive now, helping build this company with my colleagues. And so in my normal journalism mode, I'd be all over it and start texting people, whatever. But I was on like 5 Zooms in a row, and I wasn't really paying attention to the news. So for the first, I'm not kidding you, for the first hour, and this is largely why we didn't do a special pop-up, because I was about an hour late. For the first hour, I was just getting texts and tweet alerts and all that. I didn't really understand what was happening. I thought people were speculating about it. I didn't really understand it happened. So I like to be on top of the news. Yesterday, I was about 45 minutes behind before I recognized anything was happening. All right. Today, the president, well, first of all, the pool. We like to look at who gets into the newly configured pool. Guys, what is Zero Hedge, and why are they the new media pool today?
I looked around last night when this thing popped. I mean, we didn't get the schedule till about 10:20 last night. And I was like, I mean, they appear to be like financial in nature. I've never, I'll confess, they have a big Twitter following, but I've never actually seen them, used them, read them. Paul on the team, I think or Noah, I can't remember which one, was a little bit more excited. I think he either knows them, watches them, but
they are basically for like retail.
They're hardcore.
Yeah,
they're hardcore. Meaning, are they MAGA? What are they?
Yes, in a sort of finance way.
It's like the whole what was it, meme stock, like that crowd. Like they're very anti-institutional investor. Kind of going against the trends. So can't imagine why they're there today.
All right. Good day for them to be in the pool. The president intelligence briefing at 10 a.m. Cabinet meeting at 11 a.m. Currently closed press. We'll see what happens with that. 12:30 participates in the swearing in for the Solicitor General. Also closed press. And then 4 o'clock closed press participates in a bill signing. So as of today, we're not expected to see the president, but we all expect to see the president. Capitol Hill, the speaker is searching for some way to square this circle. It's being reported that he and the Senate leader, Mr. Thune, are going to do a press conference this morning, I think, where the Senate leader is going to try to convince the House rebels that the Senate doesn't plan to roll the House on spending cuts. We'll talk about that. We'll see how that goes. 9 o'clock, Mr. Jeffries and House Democrats hold a hearing, one of those fake minority hearings, on veterans benefits. Veterans benefits and Social Security are 2 big issues that Democrats plan to drive in the midterms. Keep your eyes there. House Senate Commerce at 10 o'clock, a hearing on our favorite issue, ending daylight savings time. And then at noon, I don't know much about this, but Catherine Clark, who's a Democratic leader in the House, and 3 senators, Ron Wyden, Jeff Merkley, and Chris Murphy, are attending a rally against extending the Trump tax cuts. Now, I assume they're going to just be targeting the wealthiest, but interesting topic. Bill Clinton will tell you, not great for the Democratic Party to be opposing tax cuts, but we'll see what happens there. Not much else going on. So, guys, let's get right to it. That's a little joke. So we'll see the markets at 9:30. The overnight futures are down, but Asia and Europe are up. So we'll see what happens today. Yesterday in the Oval Office, widely reported, the president and the secretaries of Commerce and Treasury, go ahead and put up 103, met and crafted this now historic post for Truth Social. And Mr. Navarro was not in the room. Other people were not in the room. Here is how the 108. Here's how Kevin Hassett, the president's head of National Economic Council, described the decision this morning on Fox and Friends 108.
Did you know this was part of his plan? He was going to do this on Thursday?
I knew that he had options that he wanted us to prepare in a very orderly fashion, unanimity between everybody from Peter Navarro to Howard Lutnick to Scott Bessent to me, and Vice President. He was also in on it, and the fact is that there were options for the president. That's always what he likes to see, and then he had the options and he was thinking about them, and then he made, I think, the absolutely right, decisive call to go with really the bigger move rather than announce 1 or 2 trade deals, but go with the bigger move so that everybody in the world understands that he means what he says, that he wants people to be fair to American workers. And we saw so much progress in the last few weeks once we started to announce that we're going to do this and then actually do it, that the president was sure that the process was being successful and so he could move ahead to the next step.
All right, so we're going to get to China and the internals of the Trump personnel team in a second, and we're a forward-looking program. So, Sean, what do you expect to happen in the next week, the next month, the next 90 days? Where do you think we're headed now off of this decision?
I think it's a two-track thing. One is I think they have to figure out how to get. I mean, this doesn't change much. You got to you remember autos. There's a lot of the tariff's still at 10, and there's a lot of sectoral things that are still included, which is problematic for a lot of these countries, like the EU and a lot of Asian countries are going to still care about cars because there's a massive auto tariff. So the sectorals are still in place. So I think that they will continue to announce meetings, and Japan's obviously supposed to be on their way. There's a couple other countries that are doing that. I think they're still going to want that. The looming thing is China, and this is it was really weird. Not to go down a rabbit hole, but it was funny how this played out. Right when Hassett was supposed to come on my show last night, he got called into a meeting. Long story short, we pivoted and went with Mick Mulvaney. Hassett's coming on tonight so maybe it's fortuitous. But Mulvaney gets on and he tells this story, and he says, when I was during the first term, he had teamed up with Gary Cohn, and he said, Mr. President, the real threat is China. Let's get the world aligned with us. Go all in on China. We jack it up on them, try to rally the rest of the world to get behind us, and we all come in on them. And he said that would be the smart move. And it was just sort of like, again, it's kind of came full circle yesterday where they frankly did that. The problem now is, okay, now you've jacked everything up on China. China's jacked up on us. I a funny story. I had literally gotten an email Monday, I guess, afternoon that said, you now qualify for a new iPhone. And I was like, normally I delete those messages. And I thought, you know what? Maybe this is the day to do that. Because I think we've gotten ourselves into a bind with China. That's, you've got the rest of the world and China. And that's going to be a problem because a lot of our cheap goods and a lot of our technology transfers and stuff that even goes to Vietnam from China is going to get whacked with this. So I think that this might make the markets feel better for a second, but it's almost I think people are going to sit back today and say, really? Like, I'm not sure what changes because the bulk of our stuff is really going to keep coming from China. We still have a problem there. I think it's a better strategy. I like where we are now. I also think we should not take our foot off the gas on getting the tariffs down on Europe, but we'll see. I mean, this is the big thing. Do the European and other countries say, I don't know, maybe you're not as serious anymore, or is it smart to just cut the deal? But I think they have to show that they're serious on this 90-day pause with setting up meetings, getting points on that, and then start to put a path forward on China. I continue to believe that my crystal ball is that they announce some kind of summit, July, that would be my target. Who knows, maybe June, and say, we're going to do a pause until the summit. But this is going to get real expensive real quick.
Dan.
I think what's next is that to Sean's point, they negotiate something. It won't be nearly anything of significance. They lost all leverage. The world knows Trump will never do this, go down this same exact path because, as we've said, the market spoke. And I think what's just hard to square, I hope we're successful versus China. I'm rooting for America. But, you know, Sean, you just said now we're going to rally the world against China. Really? The world hates us right now.
Well,
Everybody
hold on.
pissed.
This is live, Paul.
Yes.
Let's take the audio, please.
Regulatory reform to get the economy really humming again. And of course, also tax relief, tax reductions. We have to make the tax cuts permanent, and that's all involved and enveloped in this big effort, and all the other promises and priorities we made. Now, it's important to note that at the same time, we also need to achieve the maximum amount of savings for the American people, because that's what fiscal responsibility is. And we even want to start reducing the deficit. So with all that in
CNN
mind,
is taking this live, by the way, as well as Fox.
Reconciliation package here involves a number of commitments, and one of those is that we are committed to finding at least $1.5 trillion in savings for the American people, while also preserving our essential programs. The Democrats are out right now trying to make hay out of the fact that we're going to gut Medicaid and all these other things. It's simply not true. We're going to protect the essential programs for everybody who's eligible to receive those. And you'll see that reflected in the final bill. But I think it's very important for us to note that we'll be looking for $1.5 trillion in savings, and I can tell you that many of us are going to aim much higher and find those savings because we believe they are there. We want to make government more efficient, effective, and leaner for the American people. And I think that will serve every American of every party, and we're happy to do that. This morning, we'll take the next big step in that process, and I just want to say I'm very happy to have our partners in the Senate working so closely with us as one team, one unified team, which is very important for us to deliver on all these objectives. And I can't tell you how much I thank Senate Majority Leader Thune for his principled, steady leadership and his resolve through this entire process, and I'm delighted to yield the podium to him next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Lot of work been going on here the last few days, but what I can tell you is that I think, as you know, last week that there were 51 Senate Republicans that passed a budget resolution that seeks to accomplish all the things that the Speaker outlined. We are all aligned on the need to make the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent, to restore American energy dominance, to grow our economy, and to make a generational investment in our border security, and also make sure that we are ready militarily to deal with any of the threats that the country faces around the world. And those are all things that are addressed in this budget resolution, which is why it's really important that we act. The budget resolution, as you know, is the first step. It unlocks budget reconciliation, which is where...
All right, let's keep monitoring this. We get the general point is these two are uniting in order to convince the wavering House Republicans, about a dozen or so, maybe a few more, who are still not convinced that they're not going to be rolled by the Senate, that they're not going to be rolled by the Senate. So we'll come back to tariffs in a second. Dan, where do you think reconciliation stands?
I can't fathom that Trump is going to lose after yesterday. I mean, he's a little wobbly right now. And if he gets rolled by the bond markets in the world and now gets rolled by his own caucus, that's not good. So that they have to win by Friday.
Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that, but I just don't. I mean, they're in a bind because I guess they can shake hands and say we've got a commitment from Thune, but they've got a live ball, right? They can't just say. I mean, you can always do these side agreements where you say we've got a commitment from Thune to do the following, but I don't know that Chip Roy and Andy Harris are going to buy that. They've got to do something at this point, because the Senate is shown a lack of commitment to fiscal discipline, to spending cuts, and I think the House has had it. You know, they're like, we didn't get all the way here to do nothing. $500 million or whatever it is, $4 billion in savings is like under the couches at HHS. So the idea that the Senate, all these Republicans in the Senate want to talk tough now, and can't put up decent savings. We're not even at $1 trillion. That's pathetic. So I hope and I believe the House guys will stay firm. I think Thune's got to come to the table with some kind of commitment that says, all right, we'll go further or we'll do more. I just don't know that they've got to have something a little bit stronger than a note on a cocktail napkin that's going to suggest that they'll do it, because I don't think that the Freedom Caucus guys are going to buy off on that. I agree with Dan. Trump's going to go, hey, I gave in on the market. I mean, on the tariffs. Now I need you to do this. But I don't it's not. I don't think they're looking at it that way. I don't think they're like, okay, good. Now we're out of the woods for 90 days. This is what's going to happen. There's going to be some commitment today by the Senate to do something more. And if I had to guess, I think we're one iteration away from passing, meaning they're going to go through something again. It's not going to get there, and then they're going to have to ratchet it up. But Thune's got to go back to his conference and say, guys, we got to step it up.
I agree with every word of that. Go ahead.
Boy, I think Trump basically says to them, guys, you don't get the joke. Like, it ain't happening. We're not cutting much more spending, right? Like,
that won't fly.
Insane.
That won't. I mean,
that won't get you there.
That won't. Yeah, you'll go backwards.
So you're gonna okay. So they want $5 trillion. We all know what that would be.
1.5.
1.5.
Oh no. But that's what Johnson is saying. But the Freedom Caucus is not saying
here's what
that.
It's going to be 1.5 is the floor for the House.
Okay.
And the ceiling for the Senate. Although they're not going to say it's their ceiling.
I mean, that's the thing. Are you in on the joke, guys? Because you're not doing it. It's all a joke.
All right, we'll talk more about that. Maybe folks will have questions about it in Q&A. It may not be as sexy as a threat of an international depression, but it's hugely important for the Trump agenda. And I've said for a while that the Thune-Johnson relationship is very functional. It's not like some previous leader-speaker relationships. Those guys have their staffs have very good communication. They're very aligned on what they're trying to get to. They're sympathetic to the conference on the other side and the dynamics there. And that's healthier than you sometimes see. And it gives them a chance to get this done. Back to Trump and tariffs. There seem to me two schools of thought. And I'm hoping you both don't just go to your respective corners on this one, because it is a very sensitive issue for people. There's some people saying that the world knows Donald Trump is erratic and governs through chaos, and that this is just the latest episode of that. And there's nothing new to be learned. It was priced into the stock of, if Trump's the president of the United States, there's going to be, chaos. And then there's a school, which you can read about in the Wall Street Journal editorial page, my namesake, Mark Halperin, not me, but the novelist and political writer, and on the pages of the New York Times editorial page, Tom Friedman, both basically saying what a lot of European leaders are privately saying and some business leaders are saying, which is, this is different. This was playing Russian roulette with the world economy, and now Trump can't be trusted. I tend to be in school one, but I'm surprised at the vociferousness of those in school two. Put up the Ackman tweet. Bill Ackman, who called for a 90-day pause and was very critical of what the president was doing after being a supporter of the president during the campaign, is back on the reservation with this tweet. This was brilliantly executed, textbook art of the deal. So, Sean, start with you. Do you think the world and the business community and Europe in particular are thinking differently now about Donald Trump, or they're just like, this is the guy we knew from term one, it's all the same?
I think it's more of that. I mean, look, if you believe the reports, the bond market had a lot to do with his thinking on this. I will say, and Hassett touched on it in that thing, but there were these schools. I mean, I've seen it up close. That it's not like there's one group that goes in the Oval, and you could tell yesterday that this narrative that we discussed yesterday, Bessett going down, talking about the impact, how to play this, carried the day. Now, who was on what team ultimately, whether Kevin was on his team but the bottom line is, I think that there was a sense of, here's where this goes back to my Mulvaney story. Here's where the real money is. If you really want to do something on trade, if you really want to focus.
I'm just asking you to address my question though, which is, do you think European leaders and business leaders around the world and in this country are thinking about him differently now and as less trustworthy, or not?
I don't know that it's trustworthy. I think everybody has said this. They knew that tariffs were coming. They knew that he was going to do this. He's talked about it forever. I've said this for ad nauseum. He's been talking about it for 40 years. I don't think anyone was surprised by it, but I think they were. But I think how it evolved is kind of where people are trying to figure that secret sauce out, right? Like he went in and everybody thought the second that the market tanked, he would be out. That clearly wasn't the case. I didn't think the bond market was going to be it. And so I don't know that it's trust. I think it's like, what is the thinking? Who's in charge? Because again, when it comes to trust or whatever, however we're phrasing this, this is consistent with Donald Trump's thinking. He's talked about tariffs forever. I don't know that anybody in Europe or a business leader was shocked by it. He was open. I think how it played out, I think more of it is just confusing than this, because as we talked about, it was like the strategy was we want reciprocity. Okay, I think most people are on board on that. And then they started talking about the deficit and onshoring. That's where I think he lost a lot of people. And if you're a leader, right? When I mentioned I talked to Netanyahu, I talked to a couple other people who were like, the easy answer was great, we'll take our tariff down. And if you're told no, I don't know. Again, this is where like I'm not sure that we're using the right word. Not that I can find the one, but it was like
you can say if you don't like untrustworthy, you can say unreliable.
I just think I was like I said, I'm more apt to stay confusing. I was like, I get reciprocity. If I'm a leader or whether it's in industry or, a foreign head of state, I'm like, I get you want me to go to 0. But then when I went to 0, you said 10 or 17 in the case of Israel. Right. I don't understand. And that's what I think that's the issue.
Here's where I do my Karnak. Dan is going to disagree. Dan.
I don't know the answer, which is why I asked the community member yesterday, did this move fundamentally alter her view of Trump? Because I have wondered this the last few days. Is this his Hurricane Katrina, where there is a fundamental, this was so chaotic and reckless, like you touched my bottom line. You touched my livelihood, my family, safety and economic security. And it's one thing on DEI or immigration where it's somebody else, for a lot of people, or even, sorry.
And just to be clear, as Donald Trump would say, many people are saying exactly what you just said. Some on social media, some privately, that this is they consider this to be of a different order of magnitude than the other things Trump has done in Trump 1 and Trump 2 that they found unpredictable.
Right. But I don't know.
I'm not saying they're right, but
yeah, and that's the thing. I honestly mean this. I don't know. And as I've tried to game this out for Democrats, because that's the hat I wear, I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure if 2 weeks from now, it's like, all right, he didn't do this. It's why I just can't see him ever going back to it. Like, he can't in 90 days be like, it's July 4th weekend, by the way, we're going into back to school. And like, okay, here we go. Tariffs are all back on. We haven't made enough progress. Like, so I don't know the answer, Mark, but I think it's a great question.
Okay.
And I'll be and by the way, our friend, our friend, Mark Caputo, at the end of his Axios story, slipped in the absolute last sentence. The White House had 5 polls that they had received in the last week that showed that the tariffs were a huge loser.
Yeah.
The thing that, what's funny, during the end of the Trump administration, if you recall, one of the issues that he had with General Milley was calling China to reassure them. And I know this sounds, just sometimes the perspective is interesting that like, I wonder if you're China or Russia and you look at this militarily, Trump's unpredictability is always what scared the hell out of him. That, and I know this is like, maybe I'm just trying to look for the silver lining, but I think part of his unpredictability is what keeps, whether it's Putin or Xi or even North Korea on the edge of their seat going, what's this guy going to do? And because it's not traditional. So while this was an economic play, I do think that there's national security implications that actually probably benefit us.
Right. All right. I want to speed through because I want to get folks in because I know there's a lot of interest to ask questions. So again, raise your hand if you want to get in the conversation. John Thune at the press conference we watched for a little bit. Our ambition in the Senate is that we are aligned with the House in terms of what their budget resolution outlined in terms of savings. The Speaker talked about $1.5 trillion. We have a lot of United States senators who believe that is a minimum. So Thune is trying, but Sean and I agree that's not enough. All right, real quick, one sentence each. Dan first. What does Chairman Xi think about what happened yesterday? You do a thought bubble for Chairman Xi. How does he view what happened? This is great. This is scary. This is a challenge. What do you think?
Trump blinked and he told us why.
Okay. Sean, thought bubble for Xi.
What am I going to do? I think she's trying to figure that. I disagree with this. I think that she is trying to figure out. This goes back to my conversation with Mick yesterday. I think she's like, oh crap, now it's all about us.
Okay. Back to tariffs. One more thing on tariffs, then two things on Democrats, then we're going to open it up. Everybody's widely suggesting that Scott Bessent was the big winner in the internal struggle to not only set the contours of the policy, but to be out front as the spokesperson and someone on his behalf putting out that he went down to Florida, et cetera. I assume you both agree with that. Name another winner in the internal Trump power structure from this. Who's another winner? Dan.
Ooh.
Oh.
You
You want to pass, Dan?
Sure.
You can pass.
Yeah.
Susie Wiles.
Number one, but the bigger winner is Elon Musk. Elon Musk and Bessent teamed up to do this. And when those two team up, they're very unlikely to lose. Recall, Musk was out front saying this is what the policy should be. And he got his way. And don't think that Donald Trump didn't care what the richest person in the world thought about the tariffs.
The second stock, the stock that had the best day yesterday, second best stock would be Tesla, up 18% yesterday.
Yeah.
But just remember that part of the reason I answered isn't who had it's sort of sometimes the best hand isn't seen played.
Yeah. Totally.
It's making sure that the right people are in the right room at the right time.
100%.
So part of this
100%.
was, you showed a picture earlier who was in the room, who wasn't. There are times when you get the phone call that says you might want to be in the Oval right now, or hey, there's a meeting you need to be at somewhere else,
Yeah.
And that can be very much orchestrated.
Yeah, I hear you. I think you and I are hearing some of the same things. The other thing is, I'll say again, fewer than 100 days in, most influential vice president of our lifetime. This guy is past Cheney, as far as I'm concerned. He's extremely influential. All right, on the Democrats, New York Times has a story today about Kamala Harris, 104. Deepest dive I think anybody's done in trying to figure out, is she going to run for governor? Is she going to run for president? They lean into governor. There's a little anecdote in there about how she wanted to go to Wisconsin before the special election of the Supreme Court, and the Democrats there said, don't come. I don't know if that's true or not, but interesting if true. Sean, where are you? Is she going to run for governor, president, or neither?
So I had an advanced copy of that book, Fight, by Jonathan Allen and Amy Parents, and I know Megan had him on the other day. I've got him coming up, and I read through it. If she ran for dog catcher, she'd lose. It is so bad when you start to read how horrible of a candidate she was, how the staff infighting, the inability to I mean, I really don't care what she runs for. Her decision making, her staffing are atrocious. So go read. And again, two other reporters writing this, not me. She couldn't run for anything and win.
Dan.
Shout out to Jonathan Allen and Amy, because I read it this weekend too, actually, and it's a great book. I do not think she'll run for president. I think if she runs for governor, it will not nearly as easy as she thinks it will. And if I had to bet, I'd bet she loses running for governor for the reason Sean said.
I agree with both of you entirely. And I will say again, her big weakness is she does not like to make difficult decisions under pressure. And deciding whether to run for governor is a big decision, but how to run, because she's going to be challenged. What's her message? How does she explain why she should be governor of California?
Can I make one other point? We've talked about this tangentially in the past. I honestly say this, I know that Doug Emhoff is a sort of accomplished attorney. And so clearly, he can make some money, although his, the story, the New York Times story says he makes $6 million a year, which is a lot for a lawyer. But he also makes $6 million. I mean, again, it's when your wife's a attorney general, senator, and then vice president, you tend to get some good paying clients. But I do wonder, to that point, what does she, if she doesn't, this goes into your calculus where you say, Mark, we talked about this the other day. It harkens back to a story that 10 years ago, somebody told me that, could you encourage so-and-so to run? And I said to them, if someone doesn't want to run, no one can encourage them to do it. You either can jump on the bandwagon or not, but it's a gut issue for someone. I want to run. I don't want to run. I want to be senator. I don't. in Kamala, I kind of go the opposite way for the first time. It's like, I think her answer is, well, then what else do I do?
Yeah, no, she'd have to figure it out. She's used to being in an elective office, but I mean, if her friends are being honest with her, they're going to say what Dan said, which is you can run for governor of California, but you might lose, and that would be not just embarrassing, but like existential destabilizing. All right, one thing I'll keep saying: the 2028 Democratic field is overrated. Running for president and winning the nomination and winning the general election takes major league talent. And these folks, I'm going to single one of them out, but I'm saying it's true of almost all of them. You can look at a governor from 2,000 miles away and say, well, they look amazing. They'd be a great candidate. I'm telling you, these folks have not had the level of experience that some have. Here's Gretchen Whitmer. She went to the White House yesterday. It's still a little unclear what she was doing there, but she ended up in an Oval Office photo op. And then her press person had to kind of apologize and say he wasn't endorsing the stuff that was going on in the White House. So just look at her. Look how uncomfortable she appears to my eyes.
I think we'll come home with a winner for Michigan, okay? I just spoke with the Secretary of Defense. Sometimes we call him the Secretary of War. It used to be called the Secretary of War. They changed it when we became a little bit politically correct. But I think we're in great shape. We're going to be in great shape. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much, man. Congratulations. Great job. So we'll start with the first order.
Yeah. All right. So my point is, I don't care what the facts are. Ridiculous staff work, and that is just one example from one prospective candidate of how challenged they will be themselves and their teams. And this is true even of the governor of Pennsylvania, especially true of him. The gap between the chatter about how strong they'll be and how they'll actually be, I think, is immense. Dan, what do you think specifically about Whitmer, and what if any lessons you drew from her being suckered into an Oval Office photo op?
Well, look, she wasn't suckered into an Oval Office meeting. She got suckered into that photo op. They called her in at the last second. She clearly didn't really know why she was there, and they humiliated her a little, signing executive orders, targeting people. I'll step back. Mark, I was very intimately involved in that 08, in 04, 5, and 6, when Hillary and Obama started shadow boxing. Obama was good, but he was not a great candidate the first 6, 7 months in 07. He got stronger as they came out of the summer, and he kind of found his voice that fall. But
he was identified from his 20s as a political athlete of a generation.
He was he gave a great speech. I would not say he was a great political athlete. He gave a great speech. There's a big difference.
He had great instincts. He was president of the Harvard Law Review. For goodness sakes, what better training for? Just kidding. I just don't think you can look at their skills in their 20s and 30s and say, you're right. Obama started slow, but no one is surprised who knew him in his 20s that he beat Hillary Clinton for the nomination. He's an extraordinarily gifted guy.
He is, but I mean, look, what I would say is Whitmer, there are 3 lanes, and you saw them yesterday being carved out. Whitmer is trying to go with the pragmatic kind of Midwestern. She understands the working class. She's not going to kind of totally savage Trump. Jared Polis, my former boss, came out and mocked her, attacked her yesterday for being somewhat soft on tariff, saying that they're, surgically they're good, sledgehammer, they're bad. Jared's going to try to be the libertarian, pro-capital markets. He loves markets. He's heavily invested. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And J.B. Pritzker is trying to be the progressive happy warrior. And Tim Walz, I think, is going there too. Shapiro is probably closer to Whitmer than anything else in terms of the lanes. They are carving them out, which is why, if you're Harris, you're in the dust somewhere back there, unsure of where to go. I think she's actually doing something pretty smart, Whitmer. No, I do. Look, it wasn't the best moment, but no one's going to remember that.
It's so minor league to be sucked into that. It's crazy.
So you live and learn. You live and learn.
All right. So let me, first of all, I've got this on my show today, but Waltz did this big thing last night with a bunch of veterans and just got destroyed. So I put him in the category of Kamala. If he wants to run, good luck. With Whitmer, look, I'll actually go with Dan on this. I give her a little bit of a pass on the Oval Office. You go to the White House. She was, I think, talking about fisheries and some issues of water in Lake Michigan and the surrounding lakes.
And Trump praised her.
Right, I know.
For doing
that was
job.
the best part. Is it? It was like, just reel her in, baby.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, to Mark's point, you just keep getting reminded through these little subtle cues just how great of a showman Donald Trump is. He put her on the spot. She looked awkward. They had to apologize afterwards. I mean, it was awesome. Here's my tell, though, that was interesting. We talked about this yesterday. She had released excerpts of her speech, which I thought was really well done.
Yep.
Then she delivered it, and it sucked. And she was so bad. And I was like, it was, I mean, this goes back to the idea of you are not, she read it. It looked like she wasn't familiar with the material. It was awkward pauses. She did not look like she had command of issue. She did not look like she had presence. And that to me was more of an issue than anything else. This was a woman, when I read that speech, I thought if you nail this speech, you're going to get like, this will be right.
100%. 100%.
So this is a reminder. So you can give a good speech and be a bad candidate. You can write a good speech and not deliver it well. I mean, they all have to come together at once to be a successful candidate. And to me, this is, to quote Shark Tank, for those reasons, I'm out.
I would say the same thing. I would say the same thing about Paulus. I'd say the same thing about Pritzker. I'd say the same thing about Bashir, about Shapiro. Maybe they'll get better. There's a little bit of time, but they are all overrated as far as I'm concerned.
I would say this about Whitmer, though, because I agree with you, Sean. Looked a little uncomfortable and stilted yesterday. When she gave her State of the State address, she was super comfortable and I thought delivered it well. But in politics running, you're going to give this every day. You're going to have to be fast moving and nimble and issue breaks, and you got to speak to it. So hopefully, as a Democrat, she can raise her game. I agree with you guys. I mean, Jared's.
But it was to me,
strength is not going to be delivering speeches.
When you can look at a speech and say, wow, that's on point. Yeah. And that takes a lot from me. But then when I saw the clips of her, I was like, holy smokes. I mean, this was So if you're out there judging and Dan, you know this better than anyone, you're a big donor and you're going, I'm not putting money behind that.
Correct. And again, I'm only singling her out because she was in the spotlight yesterday. They're all in the same category. Maybe they'll get better, and certainly there's time. But boy, like between the staff work and the performance, that to me, just so cautionary. All right, time to get folks in. As always, please raise your hand if you're here on the two-way platform. Would like to get a question in. Peace, love, and understanding, imbuing everything you say. Thank you for joining. Here we go. Matt, welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Mark, let's see too if Whitmer has allies to defend her.
Nah. Matt, thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what is on your mind.
Good
Colorado.
morning. Oh, it's actually Nevada. I live in the Lake Tahoe area, and I usually am not awake yet when you guys are on live, so I got to give Susan a lot of credit for being able to do this almost every day from the Western Coast.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you for joining, and we're grateful to have you.
Yeah, I just wanted to chat a bit. I mean, we're in a major trade war with China, and Dan, you've mentioned in the past on several occasions that free trade has benefited sort of 2/3 of Americans and hurts 1/3 of Americans. And as a country, we used to live the concept of shared sacrifice. Probably winning World War II was the best example of that in our history. And now we likely need that shared sacrifice to beat China in a war that's hopefully nothing more than a trade war. So my question to you guys is, as a nation, do you think we can still do that? Can we make that shared sacrifice? Or maybe put it another way, how much is that majority, the 2/3, willing to give for the good of the country to help that 1/3?
Great question.
I think the country would be willing to sacrifice a little bit because you're talking about people's bottom line, you're talking about inflation. But here's the thing. I have trouble seeing what is currently manufactured and produced in China jumping back to the United States where it would cost 4, 5, 6x. What is more likely from a transition standpoint, which is what you've seen, is they went to Vietnam. And then if they can't go to Vietnam, they go to, another low cost of labor, low labor standards. Again, we can debate whether that's good or whatnot. If you asked me, is the 65% of the country willing to sacrifice to see significant price increases, it's tough. Because what they're going to ask is, did we have to do this? Is it really feasible to get all of this back here to kind of sell to ourselves at these prices? I don't know. I hope for the good of the country, Trump is able to figure this out.
So, Matt, first of all, I really, really appreciate your question because I think this is where this takes bipartisanship and leadership. So there's a point at which we could come together, and I wish the president would do this. Is to say, and this is why what pisses me off so much about TikTok. I get why we care about the economic stuff and getting cheap stuff, and okay, but this is a country who wants to take us over. And the idea that we don't have alignment from our leaders to say this is something like I think part of our trade nexus in the past has been, we'll allow countries that we have free trade agreements, Thailand, whether it's Thailand or Vietnam or they're part of ASEAN or APEC or AGOA in Africa. Like part of it was to set up that construct. And I believe that if we don't get together, and that's why what pisses me off about TikTok is that this should be a no-brainer. They're stealing our IP. They are brainwashing our children. It's a national security threat, and we still can't get alignment on that. That to me, that if you can't do that, you can't deal with the big stuff. And to me, this should be a no-brainer. And I would hope and believe that people should come together and say, this is a country that not just economically, but militarily wants to destroy us, not take us over, not hurt us. It's the same thing with Iran. When they chant death to Israel, before they chant that, they chant death to America. They want to kill us. And the idea that we can't get bipartisan agreement to say, these are our enemies, we will not deal with them, we will all come together, and that's one area where we will agree that we are united, upsets me, because it's not about a stupid app and allowing kids to watch viral videos. This is about taking us over. And if we don't get that on a bipartisan basis, then we're never going to get to the hard stuff.
But here's the thing, though, and this is what, Sean, is so frustrating for so many people who totally agree with you. China is huge in Canada, right? Vancouver, the western part of Canada, the oil fields of Calgary and Edmonton. To do that, you would go to the Canadians and say, let's band together to deal with this. You're going to have to transition off of Chinese investment and what
we tried this with Huawei.
You'd go to Vietnam, you'd go to the Asian countries and say, what can we do to bring you into our sphere? Guess what? We would have to give. Instead, we're saying, oh, you have this from us? Give it back or I'm going to sledgehammer you. It's hard to see that working.
I guess I don't totally disagree with you, Dan. I mean, that's part of the reason we're in the hole we are, because we use soft power as a cudgel. I mean, that's why we allowed the tariffs to happen the way they did, because that was how we, against the Soviet Union. So we said, hey, I tell you what, we'll allow you to sell your stuff in the United States. You can keep your tariff at 38 because we want you to align with us as a cudgel against the Soviet Union. When that fell, it was like, I think, again, at some point, Americans looked and said, okay, there's no more Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. But I get it, but at some point, and this was the issue with Huawei, is we went around to Europe and said, hey, guys, they're literally embedding things into their technology. Dum-dums, I get it's cheaper, but they know what they're doing. And it was a hard sell. And that's the problem, is that China gets the joke, which is we just offer you cheap stuff. Everybody buys in and goes, oh, we'll deal with the national security threat in 10 years.
Matt, anything you want to add?
No, Sean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the can has been kicked down the road, it feels like, for the better part of now 2 decades. And the longer we wait to solve this, the worse the outcomes are going to be.
Yeah, and Dan, Matt, the problem I have is that when you have the Chinese openly talking about 2027, like, we talk about Medicare, Medicaid going bankrupt. Screw that. These guys are very open about what they want to do by 2027. And so if you don't look at that as a existential threat, then you won't have to worry about Medicare or Medicaid, because you're going to be figuring out whether or not that you can speak Mandarin.
Matt, thank you. Love having you part of Two-Way.
Thanks, guys.
Great to see you.
Thanks for getting up.
Dow, S&P, NASDAQ are all down, not insignificantly down. Not sure why that is, but they are. And Speaker Johnson is now saying he has the votes to pass the resolution. Now, part of that's bluffing and momentum creation, but he's now saying, quote, I believe I have the votes. So we'll see.
Well, by the way, the thing that's interesting about when you say something like that, when you've got a 4-seat majority, it's not hard to fact check that. You go to Chip Roy, you go to any.
Yeah. I think those 2 may be amongst the 3 they lose, by the way, but we'll see. Alex Flowers, welcome in. Dude, you look cool. I mean,
Yeah, he just put the shades down. He knows he's coming on.
I like the shirt color. I'm not sure if
Very
that's steel or what
responsible
it
with the
is, but
seatbelt.
the whole thing looks good. Thank you for joining. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind, and thank you for being part of Two Way.
Of course. Thank you, Mark. I'm down here in South Alabama. First time I've ever been able to get on the show. So I appreciate you letting me on.
Thank you, sir. How far south are you?
Down by the Gulf, close to Mobile.
What do you call that Gulf, sir?
We just call it the Gulf.
Yeah, that's good. You ever go to the casinos in Mississippi?
I've been over there a time or two, gone to the Hard Rock. I was stationed over at Keesler for a little while. So
got it.
It was a fun time.
Got it. Well, thank you for joining. What's on your mind, sir?
Well, I've got a comment on tariffs, and then if I have time, I'd like to just ask a quick question about DOGE.
Yes, sir.
You know, a lot of the commentary has been about Trump's reaction to the equity market, and then it's kind of transitioned in the last couple of days to how the bond market may have impacted his decision making. But I think that, you know, Scott Bessent, I mean, I've really gotten to listen to him over the past several months, and obviously he's a very smart guy with the markets. And I'm sure that when they were formulating this plan, they knew that the equity markets were likely going to do exactly what they did. But I would imagine that they were uncertain of what the bond market reaction would be. And so I find it difficult to say that they were surprised with the way the bond market reacted, kind of bipolar. They knew there was a good chance that the bond market would strengthen and yields would drop, but they hoped that that would be persistent. And I think the bounce back in yields over the last couple of days really wasn't what they were hoping for. But I don't think that they didn't see that as a possibility as they were formulating their plan. And you know, the two groups of people that are most affected by bond yields, of course, are retirees and the middle class, working class. And you know, because when the equity markets were down 10%, bond prices were up 9%. So for somebody that's in retirement, their portfolios are generally transitioned out of the equity market and into the bond market. And so that group of investors weren't panicking as someone that's my age, 50 years old, who's in the equity markets. And so they knew that that constituency wasn't losing their retirement when the bond market was up 9%. Then when yields rose back up, you know, 50 basis points in a matter of days, I think that was the sign for them that, hey, we need to back off a little bit, let the bond market figure out what it wants to do, because we can't have the equity investors with their pants on fire and have our bond investors also uncertain about what this policy is going to do to their, you know, retirement portfolio. So, you know, and I know people have talked about the equity and the bond, but I really think it was anticipated that there would be a reaction, just not certain what the reaction will be in the bond market. So just want to make that comment.
Yes, sir. Very shrewd.
And also, one thing I haven't noticed, since DOGE early on in the administration, they began reporting on the USAID funding and all the NGOs that were associated with that funding mechanism. I haven't really seen any investigative reporting. I saw some early reports online, don't know how credible they were, listing some of the prominent political leaders and their involvement with some of these NGOs, political leaders, their families, their extended families, and how they may have been plugged in with these NGOs. And I was really kind of anticipating that there may be, and so that led to a lot of conspiracy theories about how they were making money off of this personally. And I was expecting maybe some journalists to dig into that to either prove or disprove that idea that a lot of these people are using that as a mechanism to make their money, you know, funneled through the federal government. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is it just completely, you know, kind of a conspiracy theory with no basis for in reality?
Alex, do you remember some of the names that you saw that revolved around that storyline?
Well, I saw. Well, first of all, I certainly believe it's if it is an issue, it's bipartisan. I do believe that both. But I saw Pritzker's name come up on one post. He's the one that I just remember. I remember seeing 3 or 4 reports of that. But so that's the only one I remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say just as a general matter, I remember vaguely what you're talking about. The bandwidth for investigative reporting is probably in some places at an all-time low. There's other places that have risen up, but doing that kind of investigative reporting takes a lot of time, and there's so much going on that even the biggest places that can file Freedom of Information Act requests and litigate them if they get denied, that can devote reporter time to maybe reporting for weeks or months and ending up nowhere. There's very little of that now, and what there is divided in a million ways. So, I just as a general matter, I could say if I were cloned and my clone was go pursue the 10 best investigative stories about DOGE you can think of, I'd have plenty to do, and that may not make the list because there is so much. Sean.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the things that's been tough about DOGE is sometimes figuring out, following the bouncing ball. So I'll see a story come up, then I'll see something on the news saying it's not trying to figure out to dig deep, because I think some of the media analysis of DOGE is not entirely accurate, but I think some of the revisions that DOGE puts up there, where they'll claim a number and then they change it, it's hard sometimes to keep up. Some of this, I mean, what the overall issue to me though is that a lot of this has been exposed, and I hope that we get to the bottom of it. Even just a fraction of it would be a huge bonus, but it needs to be an enduring thing, and that's the problem, is that it takes someone of a Musk to actually be able to have the authority to get in and do that. Most people won't. Most departments would never allow it to happen in the first place. So I think the hardest part about this is there's so much coming out that it really is hard for anyone to follow this and go deeper than what's at stake.
Dan.
Or what's put out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Sean that it's just so much of DOGE, it's so hard to follow because half the time what they said was not correct or they exaggerated something. I don't know about J.B. Pritzker. He's worth about $3 billion. The family's worth about, the Pritzker family, for those who don't know, founded Hyatt Hotels, and they're one of the wealthiest kind of original U.S. industrial families in the country. So does he potentially have exposure to an NGO? Like, it's possible, right? But kind of like with Trump, I think it'd be less influential. I do believe that there are members of Congress in both parties that have conflicts of interest with lobby shops, corporations, NGOs, the number of people in government whose families have made money while the principal of the household was in Congress or whatnot is so high to count. And it is totally bipartisan. I think that's why nobody blows the whistle on it. It's mutually assured destruction. And I think even in the Trump White House, they would not want people sniffing around about conflicts of interest. I mean, look, it's all over the internet. Who knows if it's true? Some people seem to have remarkably good timing yesterday with that tariff announcement, who had like $1 million investments that returned $40 million in 30 minutes. Could be they just made a good guess.
AOC and others are wondering whether any members of Congress did that.
So can I here's the real interesting thing. Having served both on Capitol Hill for 13 years and then in the White House and in the military, when you work on Capitol Hill as a staffer or a member, as Dan alluding to, you can trade stocks freely. As a staffer, you don't even have to report it unless you make over a certain threshold. In the White House, when I walked in, they said, you fill out your disclosure form, everything you own. And I had invested in, did these things called drip stocks back in the 90s, where I would send like $50 to Coke and, who else? I think I had 10 sort of blue chips and I sent $50 a month into each. And that's, I'd gotten burned in the 90s on the .com bubble. And they came in, and anything over $10,000 had to be sold immediately. And the only thing that you are allowed to have is a mutual fund, so that you can take everything you want and put it in a mutual fund. I don't know why that shouldn't be just why Congress keeps debating the Stock Act and this and that. And not this to me, it's not like I get if I wanted to be able to invest. And so I did. I took every penny, I put it into a one of those, I won't name the fund because I don't want to, but it's just, someone said, here's the simplest one to put it in. I put it in, I did fine. The market goes up, you do well. The market goes down, you don't. And so I think anyone should be able to be invested. That's a good thing for their family and for themselves. But the idea that members of Congress can still trade individual stocks is insane. And I don't even know why. I mean, I get why they don't want to do this. But I mean, I would too if I were the subcommittee chairman on X and could buy the dips and the falls. But this is, to me, insane how they get to do it, and there's not wider spread outrage.
Agreed. There's pretty
And
widespread
family
outrage and
members
bipartisan,
Yep.
but it's a typical thing. They don't want to do it, so they have various competing bills, and they just use the process to let it all die. It's really ridiculous. Alex, how'd you become part of the two-way community?
Well, I found you. I believe you had done an interview with Tucker Carlson maybe about 6-7 months ago. Does that sound?
That sounds about right.
And I had watched that and thought that you were I guess in Trump parlance, you were a deep state wolf in sheep's clothing. And so I was intrigued. And so when I saw your two-way,
it's in a sweatshirt. It's a hoodie, not.
When I saw your two-way pop up on my YouTube feed, I started watching it to determine if I was correct or not. And I'm happy to report that I was not correct. And so I've continued to watch.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that on multiple levels. I'm a student of the deep state. Thank you for joining. Very grateful.
Yes, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you for being part of it.
Thanks, Alex.
Dave, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Calling in from Morristown, New Jersey. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask a question around the role of journalism in this moment with the Trump administration. So, Mark, the one word I've heard you describe the administration most with is unprecedented. And is it the role of journalism to just report the news or to characterize what's happening? Right? If you thread the needle through everything we're seeing, is it the role of journalism to say, this is X, this is Y, this is Z, or is it just to be honest and report the news? Like, what do you think?
Well, we got only a couple minutes left, so I'm going to give a real brief answer, and you come back, we'll talk more about it another time, and Dan and Sean will weigh in too. I think it's to give the American people the information they need to understand what the government's doing and to hold the government accountable. And so I'm for just a lot of transparency, a lot of information, not necessarily quoting people to say things that I, as a journalist, don't want to say myself. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. So I'm just for describing what's happening, put it in context, hold all powerful interests accountable to the public interest by telling people what they're doing and let the people decide. That's my philosophy. There's obviously that specific language, case by case, sometimes raises questions about how exactly you execute that. But I don't think our job is to be for or against the president or the administration, whoever it is. It's to hold them accountable and let the public decide. Sean.
Yeah.
Dave, first of all, great question. I think that my answer is very simple. This should be who, what, where, when, and why. Like, you tell them what's happening and let people make decisions about whether it's a good or a bad thing. The media, to your point, what I loved about your question is the adjectives they use. When you read like an Axios story, they'll say Trump continues his destructive force against the federal government. That's their description of what's happening. That's not, I mean, if you want to look at what DOGE is doing and think of it as destructive, as an Axios would say, that's your call as a reader based on what you should be getting. They're making a decision about what the outcome is, that this person is good or bad, this policy makes sense or it doesn't. But when Politico and Axios and the Washington Post and the New York Times make that decision for you as a reader or a viewer, that's the problem. They continue to put their thumb on the scale about what you see, read, and hear over and over again. And that's the problem, is that they are They are the problem. They love to preach about misinformation and the truth. They are the biggest purveyors of misinformation and deception and falsehoods when it comes to how they report the so-called news. And I think the adjectives that they use explain their bias every day of the week.
Dan.
I agree with both of you, and the right does it too. It's selective news and how they describe it. We will move past Trump derangement syndrome when the press stops framing everything the way they do.
Dave, thank you again. Great question. Big topic. I'm sorry we had to give it a little bit of short shrift because we're out of time, but thank you for coming on. Very grateful to you. People ask always, like, why didn't you cover this, that? We didn't talk about Social Security today in any depth. We didn't talk about the president targeting 2 private individuals with executive orders yesterday. We didn't talk about the inflation numbers that came out this morning. We just can't talk about everything in an hour. Doesn't mean we're not interested in other things. Do our best in a live program to talk about what we think is most important and where we can find the most value. Speaking of adding value, Sean, what do you have on your program tonight? Kevin Hassett.
I am literally going to walk over and grab Kevin Hassett. He is on tonight. And actually, sometimes God gives you a present. It was not great timing yesterday. Thanks for Mick Mulvaney for filling in. But today, of all days, there's going to be a lot. I will ask about, I'll throw in your Social Security question with Kevin. I also want to talk about the pharma tariffs with him, because this is an interesting angle that I think, probably doesn't get as much coverage, but is going to impact a lot of people. I'll talk about the bond market. So I'm excited to have this conversation with Kevin Hassett. And if I have to go to his house, I will.
All right. Tell him we said hi. Two ways left today. 4 o'clock Eastern time, the Moynihan Report. Michael Moynihan, great booking. Andrew Sullivan, one of the smartest people on the planet. Sponsored by Fire, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Watch it on two-way, on YouTube, on X, 4 p.m. Michael Moynihan and Andrew Sullivan. And then at 6 o'clock, I'll be back with two-way tonight. My guests, assuming there's no votes that screw things up, as happened last night where we had a congressman on and got canceled, rescheduled. Mike Lawler, who's been on two-way before, great guest, very interesting guy, represents the swing district here in New York. Mike Lawler, in theory, will be with us for the hour. So join us tonight at 6, and we'll be back in 23 hours or 22 hours and 58 minutes for another episode of this program. For Dan, Sean, the entire cast and crew of the morning meeting, thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.